Does everything have to be perfect for you to feel satisfied? Do small mistakes leave you feeling anxious and defeated? You're not alone. The relationship between perfectionism and anxiety is powerful, and for many, it can feel like an endless cycle, striving for perfection, failing to meet impossible standards, and feeling anxious because of it. But the good news is, there's a way out. In today's video, we'll dive into the hidden connection between anxiety and perfectionism, and I'll share practical tips to help you break the cycle and find peace in imperfection. 1. Understanding perfectionism, what it really means. Perfectionism is more than just setting high standards or wanting to do a good job. At its core, perfectionism is the need to appear flawless or to meet incredibly high, often unrealistic expectations. It's the mindset that nothing is ever good enough, whether it's a project at work, a personal goal, or even everyday tasks. People who struggle with perfectionism often experience feelings of failure and inadequacy, even when they've put in their best effort. The problem is that perfectionism creates standards that are impossible to achieve, leading to disappointment, frustration, and, most importantly, anxiety. 2. How anxiety and perfectionism fuel each other. So how exactly do anxiety and perfectionism feed off one another? Picture this. You set a goal to complete a project perfectly. As you work, the pressure builds because you want everything to go flawlessly. Any small setback feels like a disaster. You start feeling anxious, worrying about how you'll meet those high expectations. That anxiety pushes you to work even harder, but the harder you push, the more anxious you become when things aren't perfect. This cycle can be incredibly draining. Perfectionists often feel anxious about not meeting their own standards, while their anxiety increases the pressure to be perfect. It's a self-perpetuating loop that can be tough to escape. But don't worry, there are ways to stop the cycle. 3. Signs you might be struggling with perfectionism-related anxiety. You might be wondering if perfectionism is affecting your anxiety levels. Here are some common signs that your perfectionism may be fueling your anxiety. A fear of failure. Perfectionists often feel like failure is not an option. Even a small mistake can feel like a major setback. This fear of failure leads to constant stress and pressure, which can increase anxiety levels. B. Procrastination. Interestingly, perfectionism often leads to procrastination. Because the pressure to perform perfectly is so overwhelming, perfectionists may avoid starting tasks out of fear that they won't meet their own expectations. This avoidance behavior can lead to anxiety about deadlines and unfinished work. It's all or nothing thinking. If you have a perfectionist mindset, you might view things in extremes. For example, you may feel like your work is either perfect or a total failure, with no in between. This black and white thinking can contribute to anxiety, as you're constantly worried about not achieving perfection. To constant self-criticism. Perfectionists are often their own worst critics. They spend a lot of time focusing on their mistakes, no matter how small, which leads to a negative self-image and heightened anxiety. The constant self-judgment keeps them stuck in the anxiety-perfectionism loop. If these signs sound familiar, perfectionism could be playing a significant role in your anxiety. But now let's talk about how to break free. 4. The root of perfectionism. Where it comes from. To better understand how to overcome perfectionism, it's important to know where it stems from. Perfectionism often has its roots in childhood. It can come from growing up in environments where praise was tied to achievements, such as getting perfect grades or excelling in sports. These experiences can teach people to believe their worth is based on what they achieve rather than who they are. Society also plays a role. We live in a culture that often glorifies perfection, whether through social media, where we only see people's highlight reels, or in professional settings, where mistakes are often frowned upon. These external pressures add to the internal pressure we put on ourselves. Understanding these origins can help you be kinder to yourself. Perfectionism isn't something you're born with, it's learned behavior, which means it's also something you can unlearn. 5. Breaking the cycle. How to manage anxiety and perfectionism. Now that we understand the link between anxiety and perfectionism, let's talk about practical ways to break the cycle. Here are some actionable tips to help you manage both perfectionism and anxiety. Embrace imperfection. One of the most powerful ways to combat perfectionism is to start embracing imperfection. Understand that making mistakes is a natural part of life, and no one, absolutely no one, is perfect. Instead of aiming for flawless, aim for good enough. Learning to be okay with imperfection takes time, but it can drastically reduce your anxiety. Example: if you're working on a project, set a timer and allow yourself a specific amount of time to complete it. When the timer goes off, stop and accept that it's okay to turn in work that isn't perfect. Over time, this practice will teach your brain that perfection isn't necessary for success. Challenge negative thoughts. Perfectionism is often driven by negative thoughts. Thoughts like, "I'll never be good enough," or "If I don't do this perfectly, I'll fail." Start challenging those thoughts. Ask yourself, "Is this true?" Or, "What's the worst that could really happen?" Often, our fears are exaggerated, and by questioning them, you can reduce the anxiety they create. Example: if you catch yourself thinking, "If I don't get an A on this assignment, I'm a failure," challenge that thought. Realistically, one grade doesn't define your worth, and even if you don't get an A, life will move forward. Practice self-compassion. Perfectionists tend to be really hard on themselves. Instead, try practicing self-compassion. Talk to yourself the way you would talk to a close friend. Would you criticize your friend for making a small mistake? Probably not. So why do it to yourself? Example: next time you make a mistake, say to yourself, "It's okay. Everyone makes mistakes, and this doesn't define me." Over time, this self-compassion can help ease both your perfectionism and anxiety. To set realistic goals. Perfectionists often set incredibly high, unachievable goals. To reduce anxiety, break your goals into smaller, realistic steps. Celebrate progress, not just the final result. Example: if you're working on a big project, set a goal to complete one section at a time instead of focusing on the entire project. This makes the task feel more manageable and reduces the pressure to be perfect. Create boundaries around work and rest. Perfectionists tend to overwork themselves, constantly pushing to meet unrealistic standards. This can lead to burnout and increased anxiety. Set clear boundaries around work and rest. Allow yourself to take breaks and to rest without feeling guilty. Remember, rest is productive. 6. Letting go of the need for control. At the core of perfectionism is the need for control. Perfectionists often feel that if they can just control everything, every detail, every outcome, then they can prevent failure. But here's the truth: no matter how hard we try, we can't control everything. Life is unpredictable, and trying to control everything only leads to more anxiety. Instead of focusing on controlling outcomes, shift your focus to what you can control: your effort, your mindset, and your attitude. Let go of the need for everything to be perfect and accept that sometimes things will go wrong, and that's okay. 7. Redefining success. Perfectionists often define success in a narrow way through achievements, grades, or meeting impossible standards. But success is so much more than that. Success can be about progress, learning, and growth. It's about showing up, trying your best, and learning from your mistakes. By redefining what success looks like, you can free yourself from the pressure to be perfect and reduce the anxiety that comes with it. Example: instead of defining success as completing a project perfectly, define it as making progress, learning something new, or simply doing your best. This shift in mindset can help alleviate the pressure to be perfect and reduce your anxiety. 8. Seeking help when you need it. If you're struggling with perfectionism and anxiety, know that it's okay to ask for help. Sometimes breaking free from the cycle of perfectionism can be difficult to do alone. A therapist or counselor can help you develop healthy coping mechanisms and work through the root causes of perfectionism. Perfectionism and anxiety often go hand in hand, but the cycle can be broken. By embracing imperfection, practicing self-compassion, and setting realistic goals, you can start to reduce both your anxiety and your perfectionist tendencies. Remember, life is not about being perfect. It's about progress, learning, and growth. So, take a deep breath, let go of the pressure, and give yourself permission to be human.